Good morning. It's Monday, January 2nd. And today I want to talk about a charity that I am willing to bet that most of you never heard of. This is a charity that really should be government funded. This is not something that should be collecting money from various peoples and many institutions and many corporations. This is a charity that was set up to operate much like the National Archives. It was created to maintain the history of one of the nation's great institutions. So based upon that fact alone, it should not be a charity. The name of this charity is the Supreme Court Historical Society. And this society has raised more than $23 million in the last 2 decades. And much of that money came from lawyers, corporations, and special interests. And one of the primary functions of this charity is that it offers donors access to the justices. So for those very reasons, the fact that this charity exists bothers me. Now, every year the charity holds a dinner to give out some awards to those donors who have contributed at least $5,000. And the awards that are given out are plaques of some kind that are carved out of the stone of the old courthouse that was destroyed back in the 30s when they rebuilt the Supreme Court courthouse. So it's a great honor to be invited to this dinner. But in order to get to the dinner, you have to give $5,000. And then you're presented with this award by one of the members of the Supreme Court. It could be Sotomayor, it could be Roberts, it could be Thomas. I don't know how they decide which Supreme Court justice is going to sort of be the leader on that particular day. But it doesn't really matter who leads this particular ceremony. You have to look at the donors, because in many, many cases the donors have a significant stake in the way the court decides cases. So this black tie event is a big deal because the charity, which is supposed to be independent of the judicial branch of the government, is really not. It's really intertwined with the court itself. Over the years, the society has become the vehicle for those seeking access in the nation. That is the Supreme Court. Now, the justices attend this annual black tie dinner, right? And they mingle with donors and thank them for their generosity. And they serve in the role of MC and presenting the awards and everything. So as I've said before, the society has raised $23 million. And that's not a hell of a lot of money. It's like $1 million a year over the last 20 years. Now the society refuses to give out the names of the donors. But the New York Times found out a lot about them. The Times was able to get a hold of about $10 million worth of donor information, let me call it information, and about 60% of that came from corporations, and about 40% came from individuals or entities in the years when they had pending interest in a federal court case or on appeal to the high court. So we see that in this historical society, they collect a lot of money from people who are going to be involved in a court case at the Supreme Court level. So that's one hell of a charity that shouldn't be a charity if they can affect the results of what the Supreme Court does. That's a little bit shady in my mind. So if you have corporations like Chevron, which gave money while they were fighting a court case in 2021, a case that involved cities that were trying to hold the oil company accountable for its role in global warming. That's a crazy case in my mind anyhow. But still, to have Chevron contributed to this so-called charity while that court case is going on, and they're meeting with people at this annual dinner, that doesn't look good in my mind. Even if the Supreme Court justices were on the up and up, they have still met a person that's involved in a big case. And I don't know that that should happen. But then I guess you can't hide. Although Supreme Court justices say they lead a pretty private life. And then there were attorneys for Tyson Foods and the Ministry of Commerce of the Republic of China who gave donations. So this is run rampant, apparently, in the background, giving donations to the Supreme Court Historical Society. In fact, so many who have given to this society are already part of the Supreme Court's insular and clubby world, because a lot of them are former clerks and they frequently socialize with and argue cases in front of their former bosses. And when you think about that, you have to understand what goes on in the world, not only in the Supreme Court, where people are always looking for an edge. And it's a big edge if you're going up to the Supreme Court with a case to have a former Supreme Court clerk working on your case. So while they may not be forking over a lot of money for this charitable society, they are using their previous lives and their influence and their friendship in that courtroom. Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is that you have to look at this with a slightly jaundiced eye and recognize the fact that when people send you a case and you go to the Supreme Court, it's good to have somebody who knows the inner workings of the court. And so there are many, many people who served as clerks. They are out there representing clients in Supreme Court cases. So when you think about this, you recognize the fact that personal relationships as well as money can give you a slight edge. I refuse to declare that the Supreme Court is corrupt in any way, shape, or form. But I still think that the Supreme Court Historical Society should not be a charity. It should be governed by the U.S. government, and it should be funded by the U.S. government. And we should look at that as a museum, a national museum. So this opening to allow people to contribute and then allow those people who have contributed to speak before the court, while it might be perfectly innocent, it doesn't give the view of innocence to guys like me who read about it. And we recognize the fact that many, many in our government are tainted. And I don't want to think of the Supreme Court being tainted. So I leave you with those thoughts this morning. Have a great day. Bye.